What's going on, y'all? It's Zap. I want to talk today about if you have a transaction where you're going to be helping someone buy or sell an investment property, specifically a property that's cash flowing and occupied. Everything in brown represents what you need as the realtor to get a hold of. Everything in black represents what the landlord, LL, needs to give you as the realtor. So let's start with things in brown. Preliminary title report, reach out to the title company to make sure you get that. You want to get the transfer disclosure statement and seller property questionnaire going sooner than later, right? The TDS and SPQ. And then you want to get the tenant estoppel certificate as well, signed by the tenant as soon as you can, preferably before we list the property for sale, if you're listing it. And if you're buying it, or representing the buyer, you want to make sure that you get a hold of all these things, obviously, before we go into escrow. From the landlord, the profit and loss statement, lease agreement, and maintenance records. Again, I highly recommend if you're listing, you want to get these documents before you list the property. I've found that when I work with investors, good investors will have all these things real clean. Their CPA will actually give me their profit and loss statement, or their tax person. They'll give me the lease agreement, and then they'll usually have someone maintaining records, like a property manager. If they're not good, or if they're, new, or it was a house they used to live in and they moved out, this is all going to be sloppy, right? You might have to help them with the profit and loss statement. They might have a lease agreement that's super old or that's not even legal, and they may have maintenance records that don't even exist because they never really kept track. So the earlier you can ask these questions, the better you can know. And if you're listing the property, keep in mind, if these things are sloppy, that hurts your listing. It's harder to list a property that doesn't have these things because you can't convince a buyer it's a good deal, right? So work on these things as soon as possible. Obviously, ask me for help if you need it. Some numbers that you need to know before you list the property if you're going to be listing it. Monthly rent. Obviously, you're going to get that from the landlord. That's in black. So ask the landlord, what are you getting monthly for rent? If it's an Airbnb or some kind of special thing, you want to ask for seasonal rentals. You want to ask for weekly or daily rentals, of course, for places like Miami, San Diego, Los Angeles, Corpus Christi, places along water. You're gonna have seasonal differences, right? Summer rates are gonna be different than winter rates. The same thing for snow. Winter rates are gonna be better than your summer rates generally. So you wanna know not only the monthly rent, but that's why I put monthly in parentheses. You wanna know seasonal or weekly or daily as well. Occupancy, right? You wanna know how often it is occupied, or the inverse of that is vacancy rates. And then cap rate. Make sure you're doing the net operating income, not gross operating income, because many times if you just ask a person who's selling, who a landlord, and saying, hey, what's your cap rate? They may say, oh, it's 10% because the value of their place is $1 million. They gross 100,000, and so they're like, oh yeah, it's a 10% cap rate. But really, that's their gross. Once they pay for their expenses like maintenance, and they pay for pest control, and they pay for termite, and they pay for all the other things they pay for annually, that might go down to $50,000, and now their cap rate is 5%, not 10%. So make sure you're getting the net operating income, dividing it by the value of the property once you sell it, not from when they bought it, but when you sell it, that will be the cap rate. And again, from the buying perspective, you want to run these numbers to make sure that you're representing your buyer well, that your buyer is getting a good cap rate, reasonable to the area, occupancy, and monthly rents. So these are the things you want to focus on if you're helping a buyer or seller buy or sell an occupied investment cash flowing property.